Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you. And I want to start by thanking the member from Caithness, Sutherland and Easter Ross for introducing this debate. It took 2 times to get here, but thank you, thank you. And I really was inspired by his bravery when his admission he was on the committee which overseen the building of the Scottish Parliament. Because I think it was 10 times over budget. But perhaps those skills we can deploy to building ferries in Scotland, or perhaps you're there already, I don't know. So it's been now 26 years since the Scottish Parliament was established, with the promise of empowering our nations. And for this to work, it's always been the case that the government in Scotland needed to have a can-do attitude. In the early years under Scottish Labour, the government saw significant progress, as we've heard already. We abolished tuition fees, we introduced a smoking ban, free personal care, one of my favourite ones, free bus passes for older people. We approved the rail link to the borders, reintroducing that. And one of the most amazing things I read today was that life expectancy during the 1999 to 2007 Parliament increased by 2.3 years in Scotland. The wonders of a Labour government. And we also oversaw, of course, a vital expansion in social housing in Scotland, something that is needed today. The pace of change was absolutely incredible during that era, as Scotland was finding its feet with its new Parliament, which felt like a bit of an experiment, but of course now it's here to stay. But in the 2 decades since then, the SNP government has overseen a period of stagnation and decline across all these same areas. Please go for it.
Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman some positivity in relation to his speech, and thank you for that. Just to say that, does he agree with me that in relation to my brothers, Gaelic cousins that they are in front of me, I don't want them to leave the Union. I want them to stay. I want them to stay in this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland forever, because it's better to be that, better together. It's the money that comes centrally from Westminster here that keeps the Scottish Parliament and its people going. It's also one of the things that perhaps maybe hasn't been mentioned yet. One of the advantages of devolution has been tourism. The connections, tourism between Northern Ireland, between Scotland, our cousins cross across the straits many of the time. But does he agree when it comes to things that are positive and good, that the people from Ulster and the people from Scotland, I'm descended from the Stuarts of the lowlands of Scotland, so I'm probably Scottish from maybe before some people would ever were.
Order. Mr Shannon, I'm sure we're fascinated in what you're descended from. However, could I respectfully point out to members that those who have not been here for the bulk of this debate should perhaps not be making lengthy interventions. Dr Scott Arthur.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. And of course, earlier on we heard about the Scottish Child Payment and how that has cut child poverty in Scotland, something that we all welcome. But that only happens because of the Barnett consequences that come to Scotland. The fact that because of that, public spending in Scotland is higher. That is why that is happening. If that was to go overnight, which some people want, Scotland as a whole would be poorer. And I'm convinced that Scotland will never vote to be poorer. Never vote to be poorer. So getting back to my speech, and my positivity. I mean, something that I've seen over the past year in this place is a real enthusiasm and energy about devolving powers to local democracy in England. And it's something I see every single week in the Transport Select Committee, where a lot of those transport powers are being rolled out. And we see the difference Andy Burnham's making in Manchester. It's just a real shame that in Scotland we don't see the same transfer of powers from the centre, Holyrood, into those local authorities. And that is what's holding Scotland back, without a doubt. And without a doubt, it's holding Scotland back. So in housing, the situation with housing in Scotland is particularly disheartening. So after the Scottish Government declared a national housing emergency, and I have to say they created it with their cuts, but nonetheless they did declare a housing emergency. I expect to see immediate and concerted effort to reverse the awful trend in the housing situation in Scotland. But instead, the number of completed affordable homes fell this year by 22%, and new housing starts are falling. And there is a human cost to this. It's not just statistics. In Scotland, we have 10,000 children living in temporary accommodation. There's more people living in temporary accommodation in Glasgow than there is in all of Wales, and absolutely incredible statistics. But we have to be careful. This is not a failure of devolution, it's a failure of government. On tourism, which we heard about a second ago, a few ago there, it's a vital part of the Scottish economy, and it's a vital part of Edinburgh's economy. It must employ at least one person in every street in Edinburgh. But the lack of decisive action has been equally clear. The Scottish Government is too focused on accumulating powers rather than using them. So I love Edinburgh, and I'm proud that people come from all over the world to see it. I absolutely love it. But sometimes I'm ashamed of what they see, because the amount of tourism coming into the city does have an impact. And the city itself gets very little direct cash benefit from that tourism industry. So the solution to that, of course, was a tourist tax. Which my Conservative friends I know do have concerns about. But the solution to that was a tourist tax. And for all the time I was in the council, 2017 through to 2024, we campaigned for that power. And I think for almost 10 years in the run up to that, the Edinburgh Council campaigned for that tourism tax power. The SNP government opposed it. For reasons that are not clear to me, they absolutely opposed it. Then they've started to support it. And now, more recently, they try to take credit for giving Edinburgh that power, a power which Edinburgh fought for years. So instead, they should be apologising, because their dithering has cost Edinburgh millions and millions of pounds, and that's money that could be invested in our city to make it better for its residents and for tourists who choose to come here. And so the prolonged guddle around the tourist tax really does raise serious questions about the SNP government's use of devolved powers. And another fantastic example is the powers they have around the use of fireworks. And I do accept that the powers around fireworks are divided between this place and Holyrood. But in Edinburgh, I've met police officers who have got lasting injuries due to fireworks. I've met police officers and fire brigade personnel who have fireworks fired at them. I've met somebody who runs a care home which was set siege to by young adults with fireworks. But the Scottish Government says there's insufficient evidence for them to take action around the use in Edinburgh. It's absolutely mind-boggling. The Scottish Government could act, but it chooses not to. But the most concerning issue around what's happening in Scotland about the use of powers is healthcare, and I think others have touched on this already. And just to be clear, the point that we heard earlier, it's not about the NHS staff, like my wife. It's about how the NHS has been resourced and how it is supported. We talked about cancer waiting times a few minutes ago. Cancer waiting times in Scotland have never been worse. Never been worse. Absolutely incredible situation for people facing diagnosis, waiting and waiting and waiting. It's something that should shame us all. As of June 2025, 7,800 patients in Scotland have been waiting for an inpatient or daycare treatment for more than 2 years. In Edinburgh, the number is 979 people. So this figure stands in sharp contrast with the NHS England figures, which I think others have spoken about already, where only 161 people, across a nation of around 50 million people, have been waiting for more than 2 years. Yet in Edinburgh, it's 979. Is that not incredible? Absolutely incredible. So devolution was never simply about giving Scotland more powers. It was always about wielding those powers with accountability, that important word, and competence is another important word, to improve the lives of people in Scotland. So rather than holding on to them, these powers should be used, and they should be deployed to local authorities. Something else we talk about local authorities, is council tax. Of course, one of the reasons the Scottish Government won the election, the SNP government, won the election in 2007, was on their pledge to scrap the council tax. We're still waiting on that to happen, I think. Scrap the hated council tax, I think, was the slogan we've seen on billboards. So the current SNP government has demonstrated a complete inability to meet its fundamental responsibility. And another example is around shipbuilding. The Scottish Government owns a shipyard in Scotland, which is fantastic, but yet it chooses to send its own shipbuilding contracts to Poland and Turkey. Meanwhile, it's left to the UK Government, and let's credit the great work that the member for Edinburgh South done on this, to go to Norway to bring contracts to those Scottish yards. Where is the Scottish Government's priority when it comes to shipbuilding? It's just non-existent.
The member take an intervention?
Please do, please do.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my colleague for taking my intervention. Does he also agree with me that it's an irony that it's only because BAE Systems has won the contract with Norway that it's able to give work to Ferguson Marine, owned by the Scottish Government, to keep it going, at a time when the Scottish Government was saying we will not have anything to do with defence procurement? The irony of that just seems to me to be appalling when people's jobs are at stake.
Yeah, and I have to say that the worst thing about this whole situation, you know, it's fantastic that the contracts came from Norway to the UK, and they will keep households in jobs for many, many years to come. And it's a fantastic vote of confidence in that workforce and the whole supply chain. But the very, very, very quiet thank you from the Scottish Government was utterly shameful. So it's time for a new government that will not just set ambitious targets, but will also deliver them and improve the lives of people in Scotland. And people won't be surprised to hear that I think that new government should be led by Anis Sarwar. But I do want to make one very last point, just one last sentence, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we've spoke about parent and child parliaments, and we've spoke about levels of government, and I mean, there's nothing we can do here today to improve the relationship between the Scottish Government and councils in Scotland. But I do think, when we talk about these issues in Scotland, I think what we have to remember is councillors, MSPs and MPs, it's not a hierarchy. We're all elected by the same people, and we're all equal, and we're all here to serve those people. And I think perhaps if we talk that language more in our constituencies, people, residents, will come with us on this argument about empowering our councils to make real differences in our communities, and that's the devolution that Scotland needs. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
A speech, not a chance. Sorry, you all heard that. Maureen Burke.